All right, guys, for this edition of the M. Victor's History Show, we're adapting a little bit to COVID. And this is an interview that I did on Zoom. And I don't think it's quite going to be the quality of the face to face interviews I've done in the past, but hopefully still interesting. And I will say, the topic today is the author of the Michigan Football Memorabilia Collectors Guide, which is an amazing book. If you have any interest in memorabilia or history, you really need to get this thing. I'll have details in the show notes where you can get it. But I'm talking to the author, Brian Snider, and we talked about a lot of stuff. I had a bunch of questions for him. Some I got from viewers of this show and on Twitter. And without further ado, here is my chat with Brian Snider. We're so excited to have the one and only Brian Snider, the author of Michigan Football Memorabilia Collectors Guide, which has been out for what, Brian? A month or two now or so?
I think about 5 weeks. Yeah.
All right. And I just love it. Now, as you can imagine, because one of the things that I've always tried to do with M. Victors and the History Show is kind of use memorabilia and historic artifacts and events and tie them to the period and talk about them, and I love it. And I myself is a little bit of a collector. So anyway, Brian, where can people get this today?
Well, it's been sold through the MDen, so you can get it in stores or online through the MDen. Some, at least in Grand Rapids areas, some of the local card shops are carrying it in their retail stores. But preferably, I have a website that people can go to, and it's www.mazeinblue.com, or probably easier to remember, michiganfootballbook.com.
Cool.
Both of them will take you to the same site.
Yep, and I'll put all those links. What are the stores that people might know in Grand Rapids? Are there any popular ones that you can mention?
The largest one is the Legends.
Okay.
Sports card.
Excellent. All right. So before we get in, because I want to know, I have a bunch of questions about the book. I love it. It's over 500 pages. I don't know how heavy it is. You probably know from shipping it. Do you know? I mean, is it like
five and a half pounds?
It's the real deal, hardcover. But I always ask, how did you become a Michigan fan? Because clearly you are. This is a Michigan memorabilia book. You're almost a super fan with the stuff you have, to do something like this. But how did it start for you?
I guess I probably could go way back to my dad's childhood. He was a child of the Depression era, before houses had televisions. And he was in a sports-minded family. In fact, his dad was a semi-pro baseball player in the area. And so they've always been watching and listening to sports. So as my dad grew up, just in his early teens, he remembers listening to Michigan football on Saturday on the radios, and he remembers Tom Harmon. He would have been 13, 14 years old during the Harmon era. And then he went off to World War II, and with his GI Bill, he went to Michigan after the war. And so he was there in engineering school during the Mad Magicians.
Wow.
So he remembers, watching them live, Chappius and all the Elliots and Weisenberger and all those guys. And he would always tell us stories as we grew up. And Michigan was the school. And my brother ended up, who's like 10 years older than me, he went to Michigan and was there for the '69 Ohio State game and, those eras and the early Bo era. Well, I eventually went to Michigan. So, Saturdays were either listening to UFER broadcast the games, or in those days, at least they broadcast 2 games per year on television. Before the late '70s, you got 2 games a year, and we'd gather around the television and watch there. So it was, we are a Michigan football family. And then I went there in '78 as a freshman and graduated from there in '82. Attended all the games. I got to see Ufer say his goodbye from the broadcast booth.
Wow.
That was very chilling and tear-jerking. I saw the Carter, or the Wengler to Carter catch.
79.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's just been in the blood. I really started collecting probably maybe 30 years ago after I was married a few years, and going to furnish a little rec room, a billiard table room, and just picked up a jersey here and then a couple pictures there, and then one thing leads to another and another jersey, and then a helmet was available. You know how it goes.
Yeah. I do indeed, and my wife knows, and to her chagrin. Do you remember when you first had the idea for something like this, to really take on this project, this classification of thing that is so, I mean, really, it's a lifestyle for a lot of us in collecting this stuff. So when did you have the idea to put this together?
Probably almost 2 years ago. There was a series of items that I saw on auction, and it was like, I've seen this before, and I don't know if this is underpriced. I don't know if this is a variant, because it's just a little different from what I remember. And then I would still go do my my searching through eBay completed auctions, or WorthPoint, or Google searches, and the other auction, and I just could not find that item. It just drove me nuts to know whether this was something different, or maybe mismarked or miscategorized, or something. It was like 4 or 5 things in a row, and I went, ugh, I wish I had like a catalog or something that I could, like they do for the Coca-Cola products.
Sure. Yep.
I wish there was like a collector's guide that I could go look something up. And the more I thought about it, I started talking to fellow collectors saying, hey, wouldn't it be neat if we had like a collector's guide or something that had all of our collections, or all the things that we knew existed, or just for us to reference, or maybe even make it out to be like some kind of a coffee table book, very, very colorful and picturesque, that maybe we don't use it as a reference, but some people might just use it just for enjoyment of looking at Michigan football items. Yep. And that's kind of how it all started. And sent out an email saying, who wants to work with me on this?
How was that response?
Huge. Everybody was so excited to participate. Anything I've asked of people, they were, yeah, let's do it. How can I help? What pictures do you need? And so it was just a very enthusiastic bunch of collectors.
Yeah. Now, did you think it was going to be this big when you first started? Like, I mean, really? And I've shown pictures of kind of just flipping through the book on Twitter and stuff. Did you think it was going to be this big? No idea. Did you wonder, like, where am I going with this? Because I know a lot of people, when they come up with an idea for publishing something like this, well, they kind of have an idea of how many pages or that. But you're cataloging. It's like cataloging insects, right? You're cataloging something.
Yeah.
When did you have a sense for how big this was going to be?
When I first started the project, I created an outline of, well, we want helmets and jerseys, and I started creating different categories. And I had like 23 categories of things in my mind. Ceramics and glass, because I started collecting tumbler, rock glasses. And of course, we want bobbleheads, and we're going to have media guides and pocket schedules. And so I started breaking those down. We've been to 35 bowl games. If I do 2 bowl games per page, for jerseys, that'll come out to be 18 pages. And I started adding all these up, and I actually came to like 502 pages. So I was pretty close, but things did change in that there were some things that I hadn't even considered that maybe we can talk about sometime. But
yeah.
Like how I'm going to display those items, like I allocated so many pages for cards, thinking that I'm going to put them on a page 3 by 4, 12 cards per page. And And then when I started looking at them, aesthetically pleasing, same size as other pages. Instead of 3x4, I went 4x5. So instead, that reduces the total number of pages, which allocated more pages for things I hadn't thought of, that we could talk about maybe.
Yeah. No, that's great. So, but I just have to ask, so it's been out for a couple months. How's the reception been so far? How's the reaction been from people who have the book so far?
I'm extremely pleased and excited how people have responded to it. Anybody who has seen it said this is an incredibly good product. It's printed well. It's bound well. This isn't a cheap product. You've done it well, Brian, kind of thing. And the volume and the coverage, and anybody who's seen it says it's worth double what I'm asking for it.
I don't doubt it, because it is cool. And even if you don't collect, just the snapshot in time of things that you're seeing. And some of the stuff is fascinating and really beautiful, which you've kind of touched on, but you've included all this stuff in here. What is that? Did you come up with kind of a definition of what qualifies as memorabilia or memorabilia worthy of this book? Because we're inundated with stuff. You can go to the M Den and buy anything with an M on it, right? Mm-hmm. So what was there kind of a philosophy or kind of definition you had in mind of what qualified, to be considered memorabilia?
And I should tell you, one of the first people that jumped in on this project and helped me a lot was Kenny McGee.
Yep.
Super collector.
Big time. And for people who don't know Kenny, I've mentioned his name many times. I do want to do an interview of him in his museum. But Kenny was one of the people when they redid the Towsley Family Museum inside Schembecker Hall. He lent them a bunch of his stuff for display. It's that quality of collector. He used to have a store in town, so you get an idea who we're dealing with. And Kenny has a lot of knowledge about this stuff. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I met with Kenny and kind of went through my outline and trying to get a good feel of what do people collect, what is book worthy. That's kind of the phrase we came up with.
Book worthy, okay.
Book worthy. And I would say, Kenny, I remember those free guides they used to give away at the stadium.
Yeah.
Do people collect those? And Kenny, oh yeah. In fact, down in my basement, I think I've got just about every issue. And if I'm missing any, I know 3 other guys that collect them. And
so I got to stop you because that was one of the things, and I'll let you finish, but the Michigan football guys, anyone who's been to Michigan, my age, older, probably a little younger, again, they used to hand these things out. When I turned the page and saw that you had those things cataloged in here, that was awesome. But anyway, sorry, that was really one of the cool things that jumped out at me. Yeah.
What I didn't realize, they had them, I guess it was just started up right when I first attended Michigan. But I didn't realize that they went on for 30 years, all the way to 2007.
Yeah.
But we found an issue for every one of them. We are completionists. We want to have a complete collection. And I asked Kenny, I said,
had the counter punt in it and all that. Yeah. Like it had the rosters, and it was free, right? So if you don't want to fork over how much for a program, it had all the good stuff. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
And then I would ask Kenny, what about beverage cups? I used to go dumpster diving and try and collect some sets of beverage cups. He said, oh yeah, people collect those. In fact, you should go. I'll put you in contact with so and so. He's got the entire last 30 years of beverage. Really? So Kenny has connections with like everybody in every genre. You want to know about postcards? Go. I'll put you in contact with so and so. And the next day, I'd have an email from them, and everyone was just so enthusiastic.
That's great.
But to your question,
people though, it is a great group. And can I just add something for collectors?
Sure.
I will say that there is this community amongst us, and I'll say guys because as far as I know, it is all men, probably not naturally, but it is a kind of collector where like Kenny knows the gent you're referencing. I think you're talking about a guy named Tom, who I do want to interview about his cup collection, but he knows Tom has the cups, and better yet, they kind of know what they're missing or want or looking for, and we help each other, right? And that's like people know from these videos and from Invictors that I collect these Union pins. People know, they ping me and say, "Hey, Greg, did you know this one was up there?" So anyway, it's a very cool community. So I'm not surprised that you got the support that you're mentioning from guys like Kenny. But please go ahead.
Yeah, and he gave me contacts, for all of the commemorative footballs, all of the rock glass. I mean, it just goes on and on. He really is an integral part in the completion of this project. I can't understate that. But to answer your question about what is memorabilia and what is not, where did we draw the line? And our conversation really went to what really is associated with like the game day experience. And that was kind of our motto. When you go to a game, you have programs, you have tickets, you have the beverage mugs you buy there. You get pennants. Back in the 50s and 60s, they would have souvenir vendors outside where you get your pins and buttons, and they even had bobbleheads there. And so that's really what we tried to focus on in our first stab at this was the Michigan Stadium game experience. And we kind of drew the line of, there's some really neat collectible bobbleheads, put out there, or some replica stadiums. Those are Michigan football specific. Let's include those, but we're going to draw the line in not put in Santa Clauses and snowmen, even if they have a little Michigan football helmet under the tree. That's kind of like the mass marketed merchandise. And that's kind of where we kind of drew the line on the content.
That makes a ton of sense. No, I totally get that. And not easy, right?
They're very colorful and displayable and collectible. And, maybe if there's an addition to in a few years, maybe we'll add those and take out the football guides because they're complete and done. You got to get edition 1 to get the football guides, but maybe
that's right. Man, that I got such a kick out of that. And you mentioned the cups, that too. It was just so cool looking through that stuff. So, just looking over my notes here, was there, as going through this as a collector yourself, was there a category of stuff that, as you were putting the book together, you're like, man, that's cool. I might even, as someone who loves this stuff, I've never really got into that, and it kind of made you more interested in the category.
I think the one that really struck me and created an interest in me was the Tobacciana section. I grew up as a collector of baseball cards and stamps and coins. And as I got into my teens, I got a little more serious with the baseball cards. So I knew about the early felts.
Yep.
And I knew about the early gum card series, and then the tobacco series, the T205s and T206s, the Hassan triple folders. And, I knew all the back of those cards with Piedmont and Mecca and Murad. And so I knew there was a genre of tobacco cards, but I didn't realize how much college products that were used by the tobacco companies to try and incentivize consumers. So that was really neat for me to see all the different felts and the silks and the leathers and the card products and the little variants of each one of them.
Yeah.
And then to realize that they're all cataloged already. They, Jefferson Burdick made the American Card Catalog, and all of these little leathers, already have a card catalog identifier with them, so I like to be organized, and so that just fit my niche really well. So I started collecting them. They're not very expensive, and they don't take up a huge wall, to have a nice complete collection. So I started collecting some Tobacciana stuff.
That's very cool. I love some of the ashtrays and stuff, and I know smoking, you can't even smoke on, for instance, in Ann Arbor, in Michigan's campus anymore. But smoking was such a big part of our culture. I don't know, all the way up to the 60s, 70s. And what you're talking, yeah, you could buy tobacco, cigarettes, that kind of thing. Some of them included these prizes, almost like packs of, you used to get a piece of gum, right, with your baseball cards.
Yep.
You could send away for some of these things if you bought enough. But they are very cool, and some of the artwork on them is incredible. Again, all cataloged in the book. Yep. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the support you got from collectors. I'm just curious. Some of this stuff is one of a kind, incredible. And you talk about game day experience. A lot of the really valuable stuff is either belong to a player or a coach or a team. And, one thing that jumped out at me was the mid-1890s little match holder that looks like pewter or silver,
right,
with enamel, just beautiful colors with an inscription that belonged to a former player from the, this is pre-Yost,
right?
And it looks like it's just in beautiful condition. I did reach out. I know you mentioned Kenny. I think he owns that, but I'm curious, was anyone maybe a little reluctant to share something, that was really valuable?
Most collectors are just very, very happy with their collection, very open to share it and show it and send pictures. There's probably just a few collectors that were hesitant to really share their best stuff.
Okay, like what are you doing with this? Yeah.
But from the very beginning, I told people that I'm just going to give you, there's going to be a general acknowledgement that at the very beginning of the book, thank you for all the contributors of all the pictures. Without their contributions and collaboration, this book wouldn't have been able to happen. But I'm not going to identify who owns what helmet or who owns what jersey or some other thing. So if you have any hesitation about being identified with a certain product, or are people going to break in my house because they know I have such valuable stuff, or maybe you outbid somebody on some product and he's been watching for that to show up, for the last 5 years.
I have some of those. Yeah. I'm like, who bought this? I wanted to know.
So if someone finds out someone has a certain item they've been looking for, that you might, how that goes.
No, I do. So, I love it.
Yeah. I told people we weren't going to associate items with any particular people. And so people eventually warmed up to the whole idea of sharing even their best stuff.
I love it. Now, you stayed away from, I mentioned value, you stayed away from, say, prices and things like that. And I think that was smart, because first of all, prices change. We see like the Antiques Roadshow, if you watch that, they show the old ones and they go, what's it worth today? So
right.
This would be a point in time. Was there any other thought into not including or not getting into that? Because I know it's tough, especially for one of the kind items. But did you think about that at all?
Besides being very subjective, what an item is valued to me may be valued much less to another person or much more to another person. So it's very subjective of your experience, what your wants and needs are. And then the economy changes, the popularity of a player, obviously Brady memorabilia, have just gone, skyrocketed.
Right behind you there, looks like you got something nice.
Yeah, it is. And or Jabril, he was hot coming off of his last season, or even Braylon Edwards, and those have kind of tapered off. the desirability of them. So it's very subjective of the economy, of how a player is doing, just personal needs. And then some of the collectors said, I don't want prices in there, Brian, because it can be held against me if I go to an estate sale and I see something, they're going to say, well, the reference guide says it's worth $125.
I didn't think of that. No, you're absolutely right. Right.
And well, I'll give you $75 for it. No, it's and they want to buy low and they want to sell high on the other side. If they're doing trades or buying and selling. So all those things considered, we decided just to leave it as a reference guide, not a price guide, an enjoyable read.
I love it. Is there anything that has come up since you put this together that, oh man, probably should have included that category? I know you put so much time into this, so I'd be a little surprised if there was anything. But has anyone come up and like, oh man, you should have done this or you should have done that?
There was a couple late breaking additions to the book.
Oh boy.
Do you remember, it was maybe just a half a year ago, somebody auctioned off a couple of, I believe it was 1927 Chicago Tribune college captains, like newspaper color prints. And they had a whole series of 50 color prints that they would put in their issue. And I've never seen them before. And it was one of those have to be in this book. Stop the presses.
Yeah.
So I moved things around and moved something to another page because those had to be in there. But since going to print, I think there might be one or two things of, oh, that would have been nice to have. I got to remember that if there's an addition to include.
Very cool. Yeah, that is something I wanted to ask you about. You didn't include all the tickets and all the programs and things like that. And you can see this stuff out there. There's been websites in the past that have done that. Have you considered anything like that? And I don't even know if that's getting too close to proprietary stuff that the university has or what. Have you had anyone talk about something like that?
It's in the works.
Okay.
Some layouts are already being formalized. Pictures have been obtained. Programs have been scanned. Tickets have been digitized, and we have to look into a little bit of the proprietary and copyright stuff. But everything that we have right now, I'm working with some of the largest program and ticket collectors. And probably between 3 or 4 guys, they have a program and ticket, or every program and ticket that's known to exist.
Kenny, Jack, Dennis, am I in the orbit of who you're talking to?
You've got several. You're missing several.
All right.
It's in the
really cool. That'd be really
in the
cool.
works.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. That's awesome. All right. So what you've done is one of the great things that's kind of happened in my lifetime that allows people like us to express ourselves, to publish things. Me doing this video, this is a hobby for me, right? And doing M-Victors for, I don't even know how many, 15 years now, and publishing the things I've published. Any advice to people trying to do something like this, like a book, and get it published and get it out there like you've successfully done? What would you tell them? And by the way, I'm guessing there are fan bases out there, especially the Big Ten, probably down in South Bend or the ACC or whoever they associate with today, that are interested in doing something like this for their stuff. But any advice to them that you have?
It's funny you bring that up because I have had calls because I posted this on the Big Ten Memorabilia Collectors Facebook group,
Yep.
I've had a call from an Iowa collector and an Indiana Hoosier collector, and they said, this is the exact thing that we've been wanting to do with my fellow collectors for years and years. No one's known how to really pull it off. And just, can you tell me how you did it? How many hours you got involved in this? And, maybe about 1,000 hours. And how did you get all the collectors to contribute? I said, well, we're excited people about our hobby. And just went through the whole thing on publishing. But to answer your question, there is so much help out there now, electronically, through the internet, through publishing houses, printers, on how to be a self-publisher. I think that's going to be a big wave of the future. And there, you do have a little bit of learning curve. But if you're passionate enough about it, you'll learn how to go get an ISBN number. You'll know how to register a DBA, and you'll learn some of the shop talk about being a publisher, and they step you right through it. And other than the sweat equity you're gonna have to put in it, that you got to come up with some money to get that first book off the press. And either you have to have a really excited aunt to help out
right on.
with some financial backing, or try and do a Kickstarter campaign or something else. But if it's one of your passions, it's a labor of love, and you end up with a huge smile at the end.
Cool. Well, you put a smile on my face, and you even put me a little quote in the back, and I do want to add this. It's not just a bunch of photos, right? You did include a little bit about where it was appropriate, about the history of the piece, where it came from, the story, some of the stuff from mvictors.com, because I've written about some of the stuff, is included with some backstory about how these things came to be,
right,
which is incredibly interesting and makes this really in that quality of thing that you're going to pick up and refer to again and again and again. And that's why I love it. So again, remind people, where can they get it? I'll of course publish the links to your websites, but MDen, right?
You can get it at the MDen, or you can go to www.michiganfootballbook.com. That's easy to remember. A little bit long, but easy to remember.
Awesome. Brian, I love it. Maybe we'll do a follow-up if I get some other questions and things for you. Look forward to hearing what you have coming in the future. You kind of hinted at it here, but I look forward to that. And thanks so much for the time.
Well, thank you, Greg, for inviting me to this conversation, and enjoy sharing this product with all of our fellow collectors.
I love it. Thanks, Brian.
All right, Greg.